Love podcasts, hate nonsense. Welcome to the PoliticsJOE podcast. I started clapping a bit too soon.
That was good. Okay. I clapped too soon, or you did?
No, I did. I sort of went, podcast.
Oh, yeah.
But it's okay.
You filled the void.
I'm very bad at filling the void. I don't let the silence sit because I go crazy. So, yeah.
That was quite nice from you. That's your first time doing it, isn't it?
First time for everything. Maybe last time, we'll see.
Because I put on the Reddit, I wasn't sure about you continuing on the podcast.
You didn't say I wasn't sure.
And
you said, should Conor be a host?
Should we keep Conor as a host? And it was a resounding yes, which is quite nice.
Oh, hallelujah. Yeah. Much to your disappointment. But anyway, we're here today with an amazing guest. Ava, do you want to introduce? For no apparent reason, even though I was starting.
If you're listening and you're not looking, we're joined by Kate Nash.
Woo!
Fresh from her Mighty Hoopla performance.
Yes.
Yeah.
How was it?
Oh my God, it was amazing. It was honestly it was a highlight of my career.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
It really was, because it was, Glyn messaged me, the founder of the festival messaged me personally to say that he wanted to have me headline a stage with a full orchestra.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because he loved my album, Nine Sad Symphonies, and I've played Hoopla like a number of times. And he's like, what do you think? And I was like, yes. I'm like, what do you mean? What do I think?
So it's like Beyonce at Coachella?
It was just orchestra? Full orchestra. Wow. It felt like years of touring and hard work and graft and being offered something based off of merit.
Yeah.
And someone who believes in me. And I think Hoopla have always supported women in music, like in a really amazing way that I actually believe has changed the playing field for women in the UK at festivals. Like they platform women in pop, and it's not irony or sort of, it's like we take these women seriously, we love their music and we support them and we make them headliners. There's not a lot of festivals that do that for women in pop specifically.
Is that true? For someone, I mean, like, talk to me in layman's terms, does that not happen across the board then?
I think they've helped change the playing field of festivals in the UK.
Wow.
Like, I think that's partly why, like, the Sugar Babes played Glastonbury, and it sort of shows the world, like, that we do love women in pop and there is a fan base and we respect them, and it's not just like this. There's a very like UK attitude towards people that like have had hits where you're like, oh, you've only had this hit, and it's like, yeah, that's actually amazing. Yeah. Like, have you had a hit?
Yeah.
And I think that the Mighty Hoopla community and the queer community love and respect women in music and in pop in a genuine way, and they're sort of not like, in a way that other places haven't taken those women as seriously, and they've made them headliners, and that's something I just think is incredible.
And they'll tell you if they don't like it.
They will.
That's the problem with your lot.
This year as well, though, was with your lot. Stop. This year as well was don't worry, these are the jokes we make. Don't freak out. This year was also an all-female headline lineup as well, and it was actually really, I felt, powerful because obviously Kesha did Sunday, and she's just escaped like that horrible scenario from the last 20 years. And like for her, that is such a major moment. For you, such a major moment. It felt like everyone really, this year, the community really did feel.
I saw bits of her. She looked well.
Oh, it was, honestly, I ascended during Kesha. That's all I'm going to say. It was unreal.
She's really gone through it, hasn't she?
Yeah.
She has, but she's so like come out swinging from the other side. And I adore, listen, as someone that was on the Free Kesha campaign from like 2016 on Twitter and all of that, where we all were, it just, is really nice to see. I'm really glad they give her that platform.
But you've had similar constraints in the music industry, right? You've had like your own battles.
I wouldn't say similar to what Kesha's gone through.
That was actually well overblown, wasn't it? Apologies. But you've had contentions with the way that the music industry operates.
I think most people who work in the music industry have,
Really?
It's not an ethical industry. It's a really exploitative industry, and it doesn't put artists at the forefront of financially or emotionally.
Something I've seen you say before, which really struck me because I'd never thought about it, is that there's no HR in music. There's no like boss. There's no department you can go to say this is wrong. You're kind of just an island by yourself, having to churn out what they want from you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of managers that have no experience or training. There's a lot of it's a nighttime environment. I always think too. Like gigs, you're meeting people in bars. That's where you might meet people that you end up working with initially, and it's common practice to exploit artists. So it took me 18 years to really find a manager that I fully trust, think is incredible and like works hard and is a professional, but also someone I like and trust. I mean, like every quality that I would want in a manager that I just didn't find before. And I think that says a lot that it took me 18 years to find somebody like that. So many artists have been exploited, whether they've been stolen from or trapped in deals or shelved or like not allowed to release records and not paid. Sometimes we don't get paid. Sometimes you have to fight to get the money that is actually yours. Streaming services aren't user-centric. So if you listen to my music, that's not paying me. We get paid 0.003 of a penny per stream. Those deals were made between the streaming services and the major labels. So the major labels could have advocated for artists, but they didn't. And then they're making like $7 billion a year. So
when you think about it from a trade union perspective, it's so interesting because I think that for the common man, it's when an artist says something like, "Oh, you get trapped in these contracts." The trade union perspective on that is that you're not allowed to work. You're being blocked from going to work because you're not allowed to release another album. Is that right?
Well, and it can depend on the individual. I feel really lucky that I got dropped because I was free then to be an independent artist and release music. But it's quite normal for people to sign, also contracts, right, need to be re-looked at. So the contract that I signed in 2007 that I'm still in, that's like 80% of that, of all of the main works of mine that make the most sort of money, 80% of that goes to the label still.
So we're talking like Foundations era, like Made of Bricks, My Best Friend Is You, like those two albums.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
And then there's 80%. Things written into those contracts that didn't, like, that was written at a time when global streaming wasn't the main way people listen to music, and we can't renegotiate those contracts.
Wow.
And I mean, just imagine going on like Dragon's Den and then being like, we want 80% of your company. That doesn't happen.
That's a really interesting way to phrase it.
Or going into the supermarket and being like, I'm going to buy a Coke and then I'm going to have to give some of that money to like the bread and the mango and the crisps and whatever. Like when you buy a Coke, you buy Coke, the money goes to Coke. You know what I mean? Yeah. And just sort of to make it simple, how it doesn't, that is not how the music industry is structured. There's not many businesses that are structured the same way. But we don't even have watchdogs. Like we don't have legislation and we don't have watchdogs. So I think the government needs to peek behind the curtain. There's like $7 billion a year. It's like, there's a lot of money. So why don't we have people checking out what's actually going on?
Well, it's one of our biggest exports is the UK, isn't it? Is the music industry. And then on the other side of that, you know, we're having this huge conversations at the moment about big tech. And what you're saying is that actually these music streaming platforms like Spotify, like Apple Music, they are usurping all of the cash. So it's not going to the artist. You're going to fund Silicon Valley.
Yeah. And I think that you know, they've made handshake deals. People don't know what the exact terms and conditions are because it was, I think, it's not been shared publicly, but there are people in the music industry making lots of money and the streaming services, but we don't know exactly like where it's going to. Wow. But it's not going to the artists. Like there is an up, like it goes to some artists for sure, but still even the most successful are probably not really getting what they should be getting. Yeah.
Can I ask, you talk so openly about these issues and so confidently. You mentioned a minute ago about some artists getting shelved. Do you get scared of being blacklisted by like these big streamers and stuff? I don't know if that's like a possibility.
Oh, I've been doing this so long and been outspoken the whole time. I don't really worry about being blacklisted. Yeah. I've always seen myself. I was independent for 12 years and I was kind of excluded from the music industry in a way, and I fought to keep my career going. I feel like I've faced worse. Yeah. And I just think that you should be able to say what is unethical about your workplace. Otherwise, it's a dictatorship. And it's like, if you complain and get blacklisted, all you do is like prove that I'm right. And I don't rely on anyone for my career. I rely on my determination. And I've gone through a lot of really difficult stuff and managed to survive. And at this point, I'm on a punk iconic label who totally support me and get me. And I have a team across the board that I trust and who respect me and that I love working with. So I'm in a position now where I'm more stable than I have ever been, and I am actually experiencing growth for the first time since that crazy growth of Made of Bricks, you know. So I'm on like a great path right now with all of those years of experience and with the attitude of like, I've been through worse. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I don't feel I'm going to be in a position that I've been in before, because of the team I have now, because of the experience I have now. But I'm also like, I think once you go through some of the things I've gone through, you mentally are like, I can handle what's thrown at me, and I've been through a lot. So I know I'm determined enough to have a career in music despite some difficult circumstances. But I also don't really care. Like I said, I don't feel like I'm relying on some of the traditional things that some artists have to rely on because I come from 20 years ago. That's actually a benefit of age and like having done it for so long, is that you know, I don't feel beholden to some of the stuff that young artists probably are.
Is that how you can release a track like Germ? Because it's political, and you know, releasing that at a time when actually many artists are sort of, you know, they're hiding in their cocoons. They're frightened to say anything political. This is like about the politics of the body. You know, you're naming people, like you come out for trans rights. You name Peterson, Elon, and Trump. You're talking about male suicide.
Yeah,
it is.
It's a lot of topics.
I imagine most artists perhaps would not be allowed to put something like that out.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I sent it to my label, and they immediately loved it. I mean, they're Kill Rock Stars. They have like this iconic punk history, and I used to collect their 7 inches. Can I swear on this?
Yeah.
So there was like a 7-inch that they put out called a poem, a spoken word piece called "A Cunt Is a Useful Thing," and I used to like write that on the front of my keyboard on tour. And so that's their history, and they have loads of trans artists. They loved the song, and they were literally like, should we rush release this? And I was like, yes! And I was like, I'm so happy I'm on the right label that get me. I don't think someone would sign me at this point. Well, actually, that's not true, because I have had some very weird meetings in the last couple of years with labels before I signed with Kill Rock Stars, where people were like, if you don't sign with me, you're going to fail. And I'm like, I'm literally not going to sign with you now. Like, what are you talking about? Like, don't talk to me like that.
I've just escaped that. I don't need to be.
Like, you're very old school, goodbye. And
what a weird thing to say. That's like a hostage.
It's a threat. It's like, sign with us or it's over for you.
Yeah. But that attitude still exists, I guess. But I think that like someone like Kill Rock Stars signing me is like, you're not, like how long I've been around, the things I've done, I'm not someone you can totally package and box into a thing. I'm not trying to be that, and I'm not trying to be in the mainstream. You know, I like trying to be an artist and to make records I care about. And so I'm not really trying to package myself in like the competitive way that I think a lot of artists are having to do. And this is an issue that is really personal for me. And I started writing about this a year ago, just writing essays. And I think in the last few years, because I think people are really political, but I think that we don't know how to use the technology that we have. It's like everyone now probably needs media training from the age of like 5, because everyone is a public person. Like you all have social media accounts, so you actually should know how to be public and how to communicate with public-facing tools. So that's why I think this period of time, because I think it's like imploding, and I think we're going to look back on this time and they'll be like, okay, we need legislation on people using these things, because look at this period of time and how so much information was false and so much sort of unhinged behavior like was happening online. The way that people write is so shocking to me. The way that people just casually like, have you seen the South Park trolling episodes? Because that was like a few years ago, but it's spot on. I think it's like Stan's dad. He's secretly a troll, and he like goes and locks his door, and he's like saying the most heinous, like crazy things online. Then he's like, "Coming, honey, for dinner," and you're like, "That's what people literally do."
Yeah,
and just I find it so shocking that people can do that, but I think that they just don't know how to use these tools. We haven't been educated on how to communicate through our phones. And now we communicate through our phones about 100 times a day, really casually, about extremely serious things. So, yeah, I think that, like, I don't know what my point was, but I do. Okay, I found my point. So I'm coming back to what I was going to say. I have been a young person growing up on the internet, and I'm a public person. And in the last few years, I've withheld some of my opinions from online, because we're now living in a really noisy time where I see everyone just sharing traumatic images, the news, false images, being like, oh, whoops, sorry, that actually wasn't Gaza, that was Syria 5 years ago, like, or whatever. Like, there's all this, like, everyone's become a news presenter, and I don't feel qualified to be the news. But I am a public person. I am a musician. I am inspired by activism. I do have opinions. I am political. So I've sort of taken a step back and gone, how can I use my voice, and what's the most impactful way for me to use my voice? And every time I feel something, let me write it down, and instead of feeling like I have to blurt it onto the internet, let me do something with it. So I wrote this essay about a year ago, and then when the Supreme Court ruling happened, I was like, I'm turning this into a song, and like, this is the time. And actually, I'm so glad that I've done that, because now this is a really empowering thing for people. It's making so much more noise than if I just posted something on my stories, and it's actually going to make an impact. So I think that, yeah, it's just a weird time to be political. And it does actually feel kind of scarier than ever in a way, but also I think it's more important than ever. And so I just want to be sure that what I'm talking about, I'm really schooled on, and I know what I'm talking about. And feminism and trans rights and this feminist trans debate is something I know a lot about, and is very personal to me.
Well, let's go through some of those. So you've got this, there's one lyric: by aligning yourself with the likes of Peterson, Elon and Trump, you empower the mentality that women serve a purpose, and that's to be controlled and fucked. What did you mean by that?
So this idea of a trans exclusionary radical feminist, and that being like, that makes no sense to me, because like, transphobia is not feminism. Dismantling systems of oppression lies at the core of feminism. So trampling on someone else's rights, someone more vulnerable than me, is not feminism. And UK feminists, I mean, lots of feminists, but I want to talk specifically about the UK, because the TERF, the germ, is a very UK-centric thing. We're known worldwide for this. And UK feminists, we have excluded, feminism in general has excluded groups of people from feminism before. And that's been a mistake. And if you look at, like, I think the boxing match that happened last year in the Olympics, where
Imane Khelif, is it that one? Yeah.
Became a huge trans feminist debate. It was called Violence Against Women. That is so insensitive and so shocking to me that was taken seriously by the media, when women are actually in situations where they're experiencing real violence, domestic violence. It's a very serious issue. This isn't trivial, right? How could you compare two athletes, Olympian athletes, who have trained, this is their job, this is their choice, this is their passion, this is their expertise. You cannot call that violence against women. That is so insensitive and shocking to me that the media would ever even take that seriously, just because it came from the tweet of a famous person who's a millionaire. Right? We have to take power away from some of these, like from some of like tweets. I mean, are we really letting the world be defined by tweets? It's just so absurd and so insensitive. And it's actually, but it is also a perfect example of how this all just kind of does come back to misogyny. Because what is the question every politician is asked? What is a woman? What is a woman? It's never what is a man. It's all about defining what a woman is. And this boxing match was between two cis women. It actually had nothing to do with trans people. And one woman looked more masculine, had higher testosterone levels, I think. Yeah. Which is something that happens with bodies, and there's lots of tests that are done on athletes before they have to, perform. I don't know what the right word is there, but I'm not compete. Compete. Yeah. I'm not a pro. I don't really know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to sport.
But that's your sport. You perform, so that's why it's in your.
That's why it's in my head.
So true.
And so when that happened, my timeline was flooded with two different sides. One is, and at timeline I mean on my Instagram and also like the news. One was basically talking about how this masculine woman had too much testosterone, was a violent man, was beating another woman, and it was just terrible. In a boxing match, an Olympic-level boxing match. Okay. The other was a blonde, femme-looking woman crying, being made fun of by people on the left, by people that I would sort of consider people that have the same views as me, being like, look at her, she's pathetic, little baby, little bitch, crying, haha, you loser. And I'm like, how is this feminism? Because you're basically saying there's one woman who's too mask, looks like a man, is obviously beating up a woman, and the other woman, who we should support because she's feminine looking, is actually pathetic. I'm like, these are Olympians. Like, this is not helping women at all. And it's not violence against women. It's a boxing match. And actually, the real story didn't get reported on anywhere. It was like clickbait headline, trans war, nothing to do with trans people. And then I think the feminine woman actually apologised because she was like, my dad just died and I was really emotional after the match and I am sorry for what I said because I was in a bad place because my dad died and it meant a lot. And she, you know, and like, that was it. That's the story. And how did it become this huge thing that was like transphobia? It doesn't have anything to do with trans people. And all it did, what I saw, was it was like, oh, it told me you can't be too mask, you can't look like a man, and you can't be too strong, and if you also can't be too feminine because then you're a little bitch and you're pathetic and you shouldn't cry because you're a woman. Like, and I'm like, this is just so regressive. Yeah. This is really, really regressive. This is really taking us back, and it's really trying to define what is like the perfect woman and what is the right way to be a woman. And that's what it's all about. Yeah. And it's telling the world that like there are wrong ways to be a woman.
No, you're bang on.
It's that whole thing of the perception of femininity and being a woman, and I do think it's so linked to misogyny.
No, that's why it's coming
exactly
back to controlling us.
Yeah.
And what will happen next is they're going to like. All I can see is it's just going to. There's patterns in countries that are ahead of us, and if you look at what's happening in like Hungary and America, it's like, let's take away like trans people's rights, gay people's rights, women's rights, and start criminalizing people. Yeah. And so that's the pattern that's the path that we're on. And yeah, there's no argument for this from a gender critical feminist, right? That I've seen that is based on anything that it feels valid.
Yeah.
First or real, like it's all this hypothetical threat.
Well, there's about 3 stories.
Yeah.
There's about 3 stories from a prison. And since when, well, I can tell you since when we've set a paradigm for an entire group of people based on about 3 or 4 stories. You know, we've done that to black people before. We do it to immigrants, and we're doing it to trans people.
Which also,
but the stats don't add up.
No.
Feminism did that too, because that was sort of the first wave of pulling the ladder up, right? You know, white women, particularly in the UK, the second that you were allowed to get a credit card without your dad's help in the 90s, it was like, ooh.
Yeah.
However, they're the problem now. You know, there's always got to be this imagined enemy. And I guess this sort of what goes back to why it's exploded in the States, or what's interesting about why it's exploded in the States, because the sort of bad faith actors that you've identified in Germ, like Elon Musk, when was the last time that man funded, say, a shelter for women who've been domestically abused? Or when was the last time that he put money into the court system to ensure that the right number of men were prosecuted? You know, I've been on many panels talking about sexual abuse and sexual assault where I've had the argument thrown at me, but women do make a false allegation. You know, so like essentially these bad faith actors will always find a way to move the dial. Now it's on trans people. But that's like spectre's going to come right back round again.
I see a lot of men, on that point, I see a lot of like right-wing American men online with podcasts saying, well, when it comes to sport, women have different bodies, you know, they have different hip placement, their lungs are different capacity, their heart. And I'm like, did you care about this before? What have you been doing then to change the fact that like every car that's made is actually safer for a man in an accident, or medical dosages of drugs and like medical testing is based on for men. You know, there's that book Invisible Women that goes through like the gender gap and like how many places everything's been built on like men and for men rather than women, and actually it can be more dangerous for women just being in the world. I don't see any of those men actually saying, okay, so all these problems like that we really care about, what can we do about it? All they want to do is trample on somebody more vulnerable and take their rights away in order to help women. It doesn't help us. That does not help women. To erase trans people, which is what you're trying to do, you're not just trying to take away their rights, you're trying to erase them. That's not going to happen. Trans people exist. And just because you call them mentally ill online doesn't mean that they are. Like, we can't just have people like saying that this is like, you don't live that experience. Like you don't actually know a trans person probably. Like most people speaking about this aren't trans or don't have trans people in their lives.
Or even the sort of the hyperbolic moral panic around we can't have trans people in bathrooms because men will dress up as women to use that bathroom. And you're like, well, we go back to it again, don't we? It's once again.
I love
that is a man doing that.
The threat, yeah.
They don't need to do that.
Yeah.
They just
if they're
rape and kill
do
us.
it,
Exactly. Sorry, but like
I know.
I pitched the horror remake of Mrs. Doubtfire directed by John Waters because I think that would be iconic. That like this like trans horror story of like men being like putting all this effort in to rape and kill women when like actually you could just fucking do it.
Yeah.
Like that's not reality.
Yeah.
That is not the reality. It's actually not even like, if you look at the statistics of like how most people are experiencing things like sexual assault, a lot of the time it's from someone that you know.
Yeah.
It's
most of the time, isn't it? Yeah.
It like, and then
is your partner going to dress up
there's
as
a
a woman to come and attack you? Like, no, they'll just come.
They just
they'll
do
come
it.
in. Yeah.
They don't need to put all that
They're
effort
not going to
in.
be
Put
like,
the
oh,
wig
the
down,
Equality Act.
hun.
No, definitely.
Absolutely.
It's just not based in reality.
No.
And I think that like feminism needs to like, I'm a feminist. Feminism is the most important ideology in my life, and I am so offended that feminism's being dragged through the dirt. And so I wanted to make this song because I wanted on record in music history a loud cis woman's voice that is, I'm a feminist, and like this is not feminism. Because it's like currently middle class rich feminists and like 70s second wave feminism, it's not the 70s anymore. The point of feminism, the point of being a political person is you accept when you're a political person and you live by like ideologies, is that in 20 years you're going to have to update what you think and the way that you spoke. Like if you're not willing to do that, then get the fuck out of it. Like you don't have the right to stake a claim in the 70s and then make that be how things should be forever. That's just not politics.
Those, you know, that's not set in stone. I think that's what frightens me about some of this feminism. The second wave is not set in stone. If you look at what America are doing at the moment, I mean, they overturned Roe v. Wade a couple of years ago. Again, Elon Musk, he is an advocate for reducing the number of weeks at which you can have an abortion.
Nigel Farage said as well last week he wants
24 weeks is too long.
Yeah, the 24 weeks is too long. So you can see how that was 3 years ago. I think 3 years ago this month, I believe. I think it was in June in 2022. And 3 years later, you've now got him parroting that same narrative. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know why we don't learn from history this trend that we see, because it was the same with gay men in the 80s being told that because of HIV, they were disgusting, and they were like, you know, I can't remember, what was it called? The gay plague, I believe. And it's like this mental illness narrative they're pushing to me is very identical to that in a different way, because it's framing the trans community as if they're ill and something is wrong with them, when actually the biggest things that are wrong with them are the fact they've got to wait 7 years to get a healthcare appointment, that to get gender affirming care, you've got to get through barrier after barrier after barrier after barrier, and even then you may not even get what you're asking for. Those are the real issues, but no one's talking about it, because the voices on Twitter, like you're saying, have hijacked the narrative to make it so that the real threat is this toilet debacle and all of this, when actually the minute you get on a plane or a train, we're all sharing a toilet anyway. And I get it's maybe not comparable to like an isolated toilet in a bar. I do get that that's a different scenario, but like we're saying, these issues are not the same, but they're being made to be the same.
Yeah, I also think we need to just talk about intolerance, because it's excluding trans people from the conversation, and it's trying to define what they are, who they are, what's happening, like you say, this mental health crisis. And it's like, when you do stuff like that, you also take away resources from people that are trans that might actually also have mental health issues. And it almost is like, oh, I can't actually say I have mental health issues now, because then everyone will be like, see, you're mentally ill. And I feel like that is also what happens to women with abortion. Like the first time that I knew about some of the really hard stuff that happens with an abortion is when one of my friends had an abortion. And we didn't know any of the stuff that your body could go through. And I feel like there's limited resources on like negative things about abortion, because you're trying so hard just to have the right to have one, that if you're like, oh, and by the way, it can do this, 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 and this, and this, the right wing will be like, see, that's why you shouldn't have it, and that's why we're right and you're wrong. And it's like, we need to be able to talk about nuances and complexities, and also include the people that are dealing with those complexities in that conversation, because you just cannot say that you're living someone else's experience. Like, you just don't have the right to do that. Whoever you are, you cannot speak for someone else if you're not experiencing it. You can have opinions and you can be involved in the conversation, but you cannot exclude them and then say that you know better than them, because you're not living it. You don't know better than them.
You're right. Even the emotion, I think that some women are frightened, some people are frightened to say that having an abortion might be a very emotional procedure for them, because you know, for some it really is. The moment that you highlight that, then it's like, well,
we told you.
Yeah.
I had an interview recently on LBC about sex work, because I've started an OnlyFans to support my touring, because there's a cost of touring crisis, and so I started that in November to like subsidise the losses. And I was asked 3 times about Lily Phillips in the interview, who is an OnlyFans star who did this public stunt to sleep with 100 men in a day, and now wants to sleep with 1,000 men in a day. And I'm there to talk about the Nordic model, which is like criminalising clientele. So we're talking about the law and like basically restricting. It's marketed as it's going to restrict the clientele, but actually it restricts the women as well, obviously, because then the only clientele pool that you have are people that are willing to be a criminal. They're going to be less likely to give you ID. They're going to maybe want to meet in a more secretive location. There's statistics in Ireland and France that show that like there's been more violence against sex workers since models like that have been introduced. They always cite Sweden as being like this incredible place where it works really well, but there's evidence to suggest that like the pool of information that they're taking from is actually quite small, and it's from just sort of specific organisations and not a full landscape of like sex work in Sweden.
Because it's hidden.
Because it's secretive, because it's criminalised, obvious. And also, I mean, so anyway, I'm there to talk about the law, and they bring up Lily Phillips, and I'm like, it doesn't matter what I think about this. My opinion on Lily Phillips is totally irrelevant when it comes to like what legal decisions we should be making for women. And why are you bringing it up? And pressed me like 3 times to talk about it, and I just said it's not my place to judge a woman and her choices and what she wants to do with her body. And then I was asked, well, don't you think that if women want to, you know, move away from being seen as sexual objects, lol, then like if a high profile woman does something like this sexual stunt, then we're going backwards. And I'm like, I think you're confusing what women are asking of the world is that we don't want to just be seen as sexual objects, obviously, and we also want to make choices about sex and do what we want with our bodies. Can you just imagine being a cis man and living in a world where like your personal choices were not politicized to the point of being brought up in conversations about how we should change the law? First of all, maybe we should fucking stop doing that, because look at who the problem is. Who's the real problem in the room? Like, why are men allowed to make all these choices and then not get brought up as like, oh, do you know what we should do? We should restrict them and we should change the law. So it's like, we should actually criminalise them.
The nuance
it's actually crazy to me.
Yeah, but the nuance of then we get onto sex workers' rights, and we start to say, well, you know, okay, so they might be a sexual object while they are at work, while they're in the parameters of work, but then they do have the right to walk down the street and not be a sexual object.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Lily Phillips can sleep with 1,000 men in a day and then go to Starbucks and order a coffee and not be sexually assaulted. And she has the right to do that because she is a human being. So if you think that she doesn't because she's slept with 1,000 men in a day, then the problem is you. Like, and just to be even asked, to be honest, on radio, like, oh, women want to not be seen as a sexual object. I'm like, what year are we in?
Literally.
What are we doing right now?
That's exploded online, isn't it? Because, you know, we keep talking about America. Well, I keep bringing it up, sorry. But there are so many podcasters in America who have this style of interviewing, which is, I think it's called the Whatever podcast. I get these clips all the time. They invite... This is rather heinous looking man. He invites...
They always are.
Always have beady eyes.
God forbid we say that, do you know what I mean? Then it's a problem. But anyway, I digress.
But anyway, and then he brings in sort of 5 or 6 sex workers, and then he asks them questions, and he basically berates them for over the course of 4 hours, and he says things like, you know...
Oh, I think I've seen this. It's awful,
and it is appalling. He basically asks them, like, what if when you want to have children? He's really regressive, and there's no nuance to the argument. But there was a really amazing episode the other week. I actually listened to the full one because I was so excited by it. He was asking about conflict in the Middle East and down into North Africa, and he's obviously thinking that these girls. He's trying to make a point that these girls wouldn't have a clue about it. This bitch was talking about the Cold War, and it was more accurate than even most history professors. She was like, well, of course, when we invaded Korea and then we had this issue here, and I'm sitting there and he's going, that is incorrect. And I'm like punching the sky, like, it's right.
Yeah. But Kate, as well, I saw when you launched your OnlyFans campaign I think it was last year, wasn't it? It's not this year. You put out that sort of statement on your Instagram where you were basically explaining, this isn't about me doing this for men or something like that. This is literally a decision I am making for me and the future of my music that just happens to be another facet of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of people online basically saying that you're like a bad role model to some younger women and whatnot. But your point was that you're actually fighting for their future.
I'm an incredible role model for young women.
Yeah.
I always have advocated for young girls throughout my career. And despite the fact that it pisses off some women that I'm doing sex work, I'm doing it because of many reasons. It's like I don't want to. There's things about my show that I want to keep intact, and we're living through a cost of touring crisis, and it costs money, and we're not in a place where like touring funds what you need to make happen on tour ethically, like paying people and like being an artist that's been going for 20 years and like wanting to have a sound engineer. I'm not doing pyrotechnics, do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm selling shows out and like headlining festivals. So it's not delusion, it's the cost of touring crisis that we're in.
But why is that? Because I thought that touring was still profitable.
Is it Brexit? Like, isn't it?
It's multiple things. It's multiple things. But it's kind of the same as what everyone's experiencing, is where the cost of everything's gone up, but like our wages haven't gone up.
Right.
So I might be paid, and then people will be like, oh, your agent. Do you know how many men in my DMs are like, if I was your tour manager, I would sort you out, love. And I'm like, no, you fucking wouldn't, because you're not my accountant or my tour manager or my manager. You're not part of this. Like, it's so typical as well of men to just tell me that, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've been doing this business for 20 years. I work with people I trust, and you are not. Like, what are you going to do? Like, cut my human band, cut people's wages, take away me putting up a fucking backdrop and having a lighting engineer? Sure, I could do that myself. But the reason I'm doing the OnlyFans is because I don't want to do that. And
you couldn't have thought of that yourself, actually. No. You do need a
random.
I do need a random.
We all needed that. Yeah.
But then, the amount of women that are telling me I'm a bad role model, and I'm like, I am advocating for women, like, that are not just from privilege, because right now we're closing the door on them being able to enter the music industry because of what's happening. Like, so many young girls that I know that are from working class backgrounds that musicians are like, oh, I'm not going to do shows because it's like there's no point, like it's just going to cost me money to do performances, even like small gigs. Like, we're gonna create a really small window of who can enter the arts, and you're seeing it more and more. I mean, if you look at most of our pop stars that we have, that a lot of them are from like private school backgrounds and extremely rich parents, and there's a lot of nepotism in the industry. And one of the things I think that's really important, that's lacking from the nepotism conversation, that always comes up because people get extremely defensive about, which I do understand, like it's not actually taking away from you being a talented person, but what might be helpful for working class people and for people that are not experiencing nepotism is if you could also say, well, what's really important is that we don't close the door on this being the only route to music. So nepotism shouldn't be the only route to a creative career, because that would be awful.
But nepotism is more, I think it should be seen as more expansive than just you might know someone in the industry who can give you a leg up. I do think it's also about, because I see it a lot in journalism, if you are given, if you don't have to pay for your housing costs, for example, that actually changes how you can operate as a journalist. I imagine it translates to being a musician, but it means that you can choose the sort of publication you want to be published in. You might be able to mull over an article for a couple more weeks. Whereas if you are someone who has to pay £1,000 worth of rent every month, you do end up working for a tabloid, and you do end up churning, and you might not get the career that you want.
And you also might just like have parents that know someone that you can get work experience or get a job here. And it's like people that don't grow up, like my mum was a nurse, like my mum doesn't know people that could like help me in my creative career. And I think that there's like a lack of, this is why I think the world is kind of fucked, because I'm like, people from privilege really are never going to get it, because they're not going to know that like some people literally get to the end of the month and are like £1,000 into their like overdraft, and they don't have money. And you know, I hear friends with privilege being like, oh, we just had no money, so we went out for dinner. And I'm like, that's not having no money. Like you had money to go out for dinner.
Or a line of credit. That's another right? So like a wealthy person will have a line of credit, so that they can, you know, but most people don't have that.
Yeah.
No,
you hit the end of the overdraft and that's it.
Yeah.
The thing also is like a lot of those people we're talking about, even if they didn't have that, will have sort of mummy and daddy money that they can just say, oh, you know, mum, I've gone into my overdraft by £1,000. Do you mind just topping it back up so I can pay my rent? And it's like they'll never understand what you're getting at, which is when you do actually hit no money, that means no money. That means literally zero. That means credit card maxed out, potentially like no money.
Yeah.
And what you're getting at is these people who are like, my God, I'm in such a hard week because, I could only go to like, I don't know, Nobu instead of this. You know what I mean? Maybe not Nobu, that's a bit of a bad example, but you know what I mean?
Well, just, I think just not acknowledging that like people have, it's just so important to acknowledge people have different experiences. And to, if you are like experiencing benefits of coming from a privileged background, to acknowledge it. And I acknowledge my privilege as someone who has had a #1 record 20 years ago. And that's why I'm like, when I go on a US tour and I lose 70 grand, that is a privilege that I can take that hit. But like, it's also meant that for the past 6 months, I've been in debt and I'm literally selling pictures of my ass to try and like pay all my invoices. But the fact that I even have the platform to be able to do that, an international name to cause like headlines across the world when I do something like that. Like there's artists that I know that can't even headline their own tours and they've been going for like 10 years and they should be able to do their own headline tours. But it's just a really difficult industry right now. And I just think sort of like this world of like, we're all just like celebrating luxury and like pretending that we're killing it all the time and that everything's profitable, and like, there's so much celebration of money on social media, and I'm just a bit like over it because it's not real, and it means that people feel like they're failing all the time. And why I came out about this and why I'm really open about figures and stuff is because when I was in America on tour, I'm like posting pictures of shows and I'm like meanwhile feeling the financial stress of losing all that money. And then I'm like, I feel like a fake, you know, there must be artists that are looking at me being like, how is she doing that? I must not be doing that well. And I'm like, no, you're not failing. The music industry's failed. Like, this is actually impossible to do. But because I get 20% of Made of Bricks and I've like saved all my festival money this summer and I knew I was going to take a financial hit. And then also, by the way, I'm selling pictures of my arse because I have an international name and a platform to get that much money from selling pictures of my arse. That's why I can do it. You're not failing. The industry has failed you.
That idea of perception and like, you know, social media persona, you talk about it in German about toxic masculinity, right? And what's being projected, and about how young men are being sold a lie. To ask you the most obvious question, is that dangerous? What sort of effect is that having on young men, this sort of performance culture on social media?
I mean, I don't really know, apart from I know the things that people know where we've been told that there's an increase in misogyny in young men. I get frustrated when I see people talking about toxic masculinity as though, and, you know, defending masculinity, and I'm like, should we have called it something else so people could literally, that's why I say it in the song, I'm like, it's not that masculinity is really this neutral thing, you know, femininity is kind of a neutral thing, but there's like toxic masculinity is separate to just masculinity. And you see people being invited onto news programs to talk about, oh my God, it's so unfair that we're calling men toxic, and it's like, we're calling toxic masculinity toxic.
Yeah.
Can you be smart? Can we actually use our brains? Like, it's not just attacking masculinity. That masculinity is neutral. It's like, and a lot of these things are social problems. That's why I say it's a social construct. Like, what is gender? There's so much. Like, from the before anyone is born, you're revealed with a blue and a pink color. I mean, we are raised like socially as humans. Do you know what I mean? Like, we are literally told different things as kids. And no matter as a parent, probably, I'm not a parent, but however you choose to raise your child's still gonna like be amongst other kids that are raised differently, and then go to school and have teachers, and then go out in the world and get jobs and be like told things about their gender because of what the world thinks of gender. And so we can't really escape it, but we should use our fucking brains to try and like not just like treat people badly because of that. And there's so much online, I think, of like trying to summarize things into little packages because it's such a crazy time, because everyone's playing a viral game. Everyone's playing a little game where they do a little bit of seed and then they go viral. And it just makes billionaires richer. Yeah. And we're all like, it's just so important that I package myself so that my numbers go up and I get likes. And I'm like, okay, so we're really willing to destroy everything for that, really? I'm fucking not. Like, we're literally willing to go, that is prioritized over anything, over fact, over what I really believe, over how I actually want to market myself, over how I want to look, over being fucking cringe. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like anything's on the table now of like, it's more important to be viral. It's more important to get numbers. It's like, it's all fake as well. Yeah. The people with the most numbers buy them. Musicians buy streams. Labels buy numbers. They buy likes. Yeah. You can go online and Google, buy Spotify streams, buy Instagram likes, buy YouTube views. It's fucking fake and we're derailing everything for it. It's just so crazy.
This is sort of my objection when we talk about
need a drink. Like,
sometimes we do drink on this podcast as well.
Yeah, we could. Sorry, we've actually been going ages. Apologies. I was just going to say, I think this is my only objection when we talk about OnlyFans, and we talk about I don't care what the sex workers do on OnlyFans. I don't like the perception that that tech company gives, which is that you can work for yourself and you're essentially an entrepreneur by being on that website, because you're not. You're just an employee with absolutely no rights. So you're an employee that is at the behest of a tech company that is based in a country that you don't live, and it doesn't offer you any employment rights. It could effectively sack you tomorrow, which is just kick you off the platform or deplatform you. And then people are forced to do more and more extreme content to be noticed by algorithms. And that frightens me because they're not governed by any legislation or proper legislation, right? So someone might be on there doing an extremely dangerous sex act that does put them in danger. And that company, say they died from that, or say they got injured from that, that company has no responsibility. Yeah. It does not have to pay out to the family. Just, it always comes back to join
like,
a union.
Well, like I
think that the most important thing about that is that sex workers are involved in that conversation about legislation. So it's not just like people that don't do sex work making decisions for sex workers. Yeah. That's really important, because that's kind of what's happening at the moment, and then it like makes things harder for sex workers. And I mean, that's also very like the music industry is a lot worse than that. Like we don't have insurance. We're not like employed like employees with rights and stuff, but we get signed into contracts for like 30 years. And so to me, the model is way better than a major label contract or the music industry. Like we don't have rights as musicians either. Sure. We don't have union. We don't have like legislation. We don't have watchdogs. We don't have HR. We don't have, I don't get any benefits of like I'm self-employed.
I think it translates in the same way that OnlyFans does, where if you don't have a platform, if you're an artist without a platform, or you're an artist that's gagged, you're in a similar situation to, say, someone who's at the lower earnings end of OnlyFans, where if they get kicked off and they lose perhaps they're earning £20,000 a year and they lose that, what do they do now? I think Chapel Roan was talking about this, wasn't she?
She spoke a lot about like the healthcare stuff and how even now that she's like made it to, I guess, like the front of the line, she's still not getting the stuff that you're meant to get at a basic level in a normal job. Because like even if I guess here it's different because we've got the NHS, but if you're in America and you've got like a low paying job, you often don't get any health privileges with that. And I think the point she's kind of making is, even now that she's making, I guess, potentially millions, we don't know what she makes, but I'm guessing it's a lot now. It's like, what is going on that this industry still isn't going to give you what you need? And I think what scares me about what you talk about, Kate, is this idea.
Also, can I just say one thing on that? Is like, we wouldn't then suggest that we should make laws about what the musicians can do to fix that problem. Whereas with sex work, we will often criminalise people to try. The solution would be, let's criminalise it. Do you know what I mean? Like if you compare the industries as like exploitative for similar reasons, you wouldn't then apply, all right, what we should do is we should criminalise the musicians.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing,
So decriminalise and then like fix the problems with exploitation.
Yeah.
How do you think we fix some of the music industry problems?
I have no fucking idea.
Okay.
No, I think that streaming services should be user-centric. That is basic and I think achievable.
What is user-centric? Like, how would you describe that?
So if I'm listening to your music, you're being paid.
Got you.
It's not going to Ed
Got you.
Sheeran.
Got you.
Why when I'm listening to your music,
Yeah.
do you not earn from that?
Yeah.
Why?
Do you know what's crazy? Like, not to make it about Taylor Swift, I'm going to bring it up, is like, I know she's such a different type of, because like, obviously she's the biggest star in the world at the moment, we get that, but I was reading the other day, you know,
We get that.
I'm just putting that on record. But you know how obviously she just brought back her masters to the first 6. I was reading that the company that was just owning it, in the like 3 years they earned over 100 million in profit from her music that she's never seen and will never see, just because they somehow managed to get their hands on something that she signed when I think she was 16 or 18 or something like that. Do you feel like there's pressure when you're an early artist to have to sign away just to get that platform to begin with? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
And there's not really a way not to sign it. Because people always say, I've seen online, why do people sign the contract? And it's like, well, if you're trying to get into your foot in the door,
Yeah.
do you have no choice really?
Surely you've got no negotiating
That's what I'm
power
saying.
over
What can you
that
say? Like, oh, one day I
stage
might
of
be
your
the biggest
career.
star in the world. Well, you don't know that yet.
Yeah,
There's no way of knowing what's coming. Like in your case, oh, yeah, I'm going to have like this hit record that's going to sell millions of copies. I don't know that yet.
Yeah, I think the terms and conditions of like what is standard practice and what is ethical should be rewritten, and that we should have certain things that are like made standard. Ethical practice should be standard in the music industry. There's so much that needs to change. I think the Music Venue Trust are talking a lot about things that will benefit and help the live side of things. But in my opinion, it's about feeding like the entire industry and trying to make the environment stronger rather than giving like grants out to like individual musicians that it's just going to go in like, you know, a month.
Yeah.
We need to take care of the environment, the whole music industry environment, and I think that there's different issues within the live sector and there's issues within the streaming sector as well.
I know we need to wrap up soon, but something that I've seen you post about, which I find really interesting, and I don't know much about it, so you'll have to explain because I genuinely don't, is this £1 per ticket thing I've read about? Because that sounded like a really good idea to me.
Yeah.
Do you know much about that?
So the levy, there's a levy that is being, I think, enforced now by government.
I think it's recommended.
It's
I think
recommended, maybe not enforced, it's the wrong word. Live Nation were the main hold up on that levy. And, you know, one of the biggest profiteers of live music. But it's like £1 of every ticket sold would go from an arena show, would go towards a fund basically to help the grassroots. They do it in France and it puts like a lot of money back in. It works in France. Like artists there's a lot of things happening in France actually that like puts them, like UK are a bit behind in terms of like how they could help like UK artists. So yeah, the levy would be.
Is it for venues or for artists, or
it would be like anytime there's an arena or they're figuring out what to do with the fund.
Yeah, right, okay.
But it would go back to like grassroots.
But it goes into the grassroots, yeah. And they do it in France and it works. They also do have a levy now for streaming in France too.
Oh, okay.
Do they?
I didn't know that, yeah.
France also nationalised energy at the beginning of the energy crisis.
Did they?
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah. A lot of French people didn't feel the burn that we did. Yeah. But then they also banned the burqa. So look, you know, hit and a miss.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's a good place to end.
I think so, yeah. Well, thank you. So that was honestly one of the most interesting conversations I've ever had.
Really?
Yeah. But you are
did
such
I talk
an
about
eloquent
Germ
speaker.
enough? I hope so. I feel like we went.
I think we did. Yeah. I mean, Germ out now on all streaming
Germ
platforms.
out now. It speaks for itself.
Are we going to do a special vinyl for it? Are we not allowed to say?
Should we?
I think we should. Yeah.
Do we have the budget?
I'm not involved. Do we have the budget?
No, we don't. I'll sell some bum picks
Ooh, like
and make
a deep
a vinyl.
red vinyl.
It would be cool. You know,
the cover is so cool. I would love that on
people have
vinyl.
asked for it. Yeah. Really, I mean, it was a rush release, you know, because I wanted to. It's timely, and I wanted to get it out for Pride, for Hoopla, and because of what's happening. So we'll see. I'd love to make some merch for it, and I think the song's gonna like take off. I feel like as I perform it live. The video, especially having the video on screen like I did at Hoopla, it really hits people because the message is like loud. What I really want the song to do is to open the door for more cis female like feminists to feel they can speak on this issue and sort of not worry about what trolls are going to say. Because like I said before, I just don't think we can let the whole world be defined by online behaviours. it's getting a little bit like that, and it's just worrying.
It's also a good song.
Thank you.
It's a bop.
You know,
It's a bop. It is a bop. Yeah, love
Yeah.
it.
Thank
I
you.
don't usually really like spoken word stuff, I'll be honest, but I like really love it. It's just so
thank
like,
you.
I love the beat as well. I do like a little bop, you know me. Me at Hoopla the other day. Oh gosh, let's not talk about Hoopla actually, because I can't. I'm not mentally
You're not
prepared to
over
talk about it. I need like 2 weeks to decompress.
I
Even though I'm
wonder if
going.
anyone saw you at Hoopla.
Oh, people saw me at Hoopla, and I saw people. That's all I'm going to say on that. We'll talk more about that off camera because there are things that I can't share.
Maybe we'll do an After Dark one day.
A Patreon release.
You can come on that one
Yeah.
again. We'll spill the Hoopla tea. Oh, stop it, Ava. You're gross. Enough.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, yeah, you're getting what she just did. No, thank you. That was so much fun.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
guys.
you.
Thanks.
See you on the subreddit.